imaginary lace. He sneered and spoke loudly. I will split your thighs like an orange and dream. Since they had got here, Bhim stood with one leg hitched over Duryodhan's imaginary dead body and bowed at the applause, a broad grin on his ageless face. She sighed. Today was going to be one of those days. A day when nothing pleased, when their afterlife in this heavenly paradise felt like a dream she had to relive endlessly, a conscious sleep from which she could never awaken. She looked over at a nymph before sighing again. There was no point getting angry at her. After all, nymphs hadn't exactly been created for conversational purposes.
I totally enjoyed the way you read it out as well, using all the voices. That was amazing. So, could you tell us a little bit about contemporizing the myths?
Well, like I said previously, my writing has a very contemporary style to it. But more importantly, I do feel like the women in mythology deserved a second retelling. Before sighing again, there was no point getting angry at her. After all, nymphs hadn't exactly been created for conversational purposes.
I totally enjoyed the way you read it out as well, using all the voices. That was amazing. So, could you tell us a little bit about contemporizing the myths?
Well, like I said previously, my writing has a very contemporary style to it. But more importantly, I do feel like the women in mythology deserved a second retelling. Characters in this book, Draupadi, Kunti, Gandhari, and Amba, all were treated extremely unfairly by the men in their lives and remained unfulfilled while during the story that everyone knows. And I really felt like by giving them a second chance, by giving them all the opportunities.
The approach to that has been normal women, and in keeping with that, equally normal men, where men treating women equally is not something to put them up on.
And I think particularly in the space of mythology, it's become very important to question what the norm should be, in terms of just saying, oh, this is such a bold representation, or particularly when I approach to that has been normal women, and in keeping with that, equally normal men, where men treating women equally is not something to put them up on.
He's much more discerning about his actions, as you've been. The question wasn't meant as counter or as inquiry. Hari was aware, as were probably a billion other people.
If they make mistakes, well, deal with it. That's your problem. You made a mistake, take responsibility for it. It works equally the same way for men. You made a mistake, deal with it. You did something decent, sorry, you don't exactly get put on a pedestal for that. Yeah, that's been fun.
Krishna, could you read us an excerpt from your latest book? The Immortal, that is, right?
Yes, Immortal. Any guesses? This is actually based on a character from the Mahabharata. Any guesses which character? Absolutely right, Ashwatthama. That wasn't tough to guess, was it? No. So basically the entire premise of this book is, well, legend goes that at the end of the Mahabharata war, Ashwatthama was cursed to wander immortal till at least the end of the Kali Yuga, at which point of time he hopefully would be able to die. So how I thought about it was, alright, let's assume that little bit of it is true.
That my producers came up for this particular one, where they're saying he probably had been the first Indian superhero. Before we had the Wolverine, we had Spider-Man and Superman and all that. We had an Indian superhero. So
It's kind of cool.
yeah, I'm super excited about the entire decision. But so when we meet him at the beginning of this book, he goes by the name of Professor Bharadwaj. And he's a historian. Why? Because, well, history is something he's lived through, so he knows it really, really well. But he's also this very complicated guy who's obviously trying to deal with the fact that he can't die. And he's not always sure how he wants to feel about it. Sometimes it can be a great thing, You know, he can drink as much whiskey as he wants and smoke as much as he wants, and he's not going to die. Good for him. But hey, it's a very lonely life, just as Irivargan said. Living long time has its own issues. So, okay, so I'm going to read out this little bit right at the beginning where he is talking to his friend, the only one who knows the secret of his identity, and saying, maybe I need to change my identities once again and move from being Professor Bharadwaj, the historian, to something else, as I've been doing for nearly 4,000 years now. So this starts with the other person speaking. Utility is overrated, especially the utility of human existence. Utility, my friend, this is Professor Bharadwaj, is nothing but karma. And karma is much more than the 70s hippie grunt synonym for destiny that your adoring disciples throw around as a catch-all phrase to explain why everything is the way it is. He's much more discerning about his actions. As you've been. The question wasn't meant as counter or as inquiry. Hari was aware, as were probably a billion other people, knew what none of those billion people did. It was a secret I kept well and at all costs. That only part of the story was true. That was just rumor. My condition was born of something far worse, something that had defined my purpose, my karma, from the day I had become immortal. Every persona I assumed, every role I had played, had been towards fulfilling that purpose.
We really that last question. Thank you very much. Could you briefly comment on the reinterpretation of the myths in the ASEAN region, like Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore? And then we can open the floor to the audience. I'm sorry, we just have to be a little abrupt because we have 5 minutes left and I'm just saying.
So one thing we have found is, yesterday when Professor Edwin Tambu gave us this myth empire, the mythology has come in here. And one thing we see is these relations in terms of the characters. And one thing in Indonesia, I think it was, if I'm not wrong, it was a Kakaduan language, the first one. But then they have it in Javanese, they have it in Burmese, they have it in Malay also.
That's right.
So most of them are around that time period. And from what I've seen during the research for my plays is that, apart from especially Ramayana, compared to Mahabharata, Ramayana has actually traveled further in these places.
That's true actually, isn't it?
And the one character who has actually been taken into interpretation, like what we are doing now, one of the characters that has been reinterpreted in most of these cases is Hanuman. While Hanuman is almost a deity. No, I mean, Hanuman is almost a deity in the Indian culture. But Hanuman has a much freer interpretation in various places. Hanuman is married in certain cultures. Hanuman has sons. I mean, like, if I'm not wrong, one of the names of his son is Tuganga, Hanuman Tuganga. So they have different features to it. So Hanuman, he stays true to the monkey nature, genetically predisposed to monkey nature. So he stays true. He is not the meditating deity in some of these cultures. Right? So that's, the reinterpretation has started much before any of us would have actually taken this. So in ASEAN, Singapore is very recent to take it and reinterpret it. But one thing we have seen is that Singapore's culture actually has a lot of association with these characters as well. So one of the very popular religious festivals in Singapore is the fireworking practice, the Mariamman Temple. And if you see in the Mariamman Temple, they have a sanctum for Draupadi. They have the fire idols of Pandavas, and they have obviously Krishna's there. And you have Draupadi, and the entire festival takes place with her as the embodiment. She is the main deity for us. So obviously, for writers to keep them at that level kind of arrests our freedom of reinterpretation. But we still have to accede to the fact that there are masses who still treat them as a deity. So it's always a challenge for us to do a reinterpretation, still maintaining the sensitivities and the sensibilities.
I know I've got enough trolls to testify for that.
I can totally understand. Yes.
Either of you like to say?
Actually, may I disagree a little bit?
Yes.
This is what I was looking for.
Which is, I mean, your point is well made that, you know, there are reinterpretations. There's also been an addition to the process of deification. But a lot of times when I was doing my research for my previous books as well as this one, One of the advantages of having myths travel is that if you can pinpoint the form they were in or closest to at the point they left India, so to say, you may have a chance at getting something closer to the original. Because let's face it, we talk about myth, but we really don't know what the story is. We don't know what the true story, if there was one, is. And even, apparently the first time Vyasa wrote down the Mahabharata, or rather set the Mahabharata down, it was 8,000 verses. It's been added to over the years, and what we have today is something that was sort of set into its form around the Gupta period, and that is over 100,000 verses.
Yes.
So imagine where all those additions came from, and the additions. It's just like your grandma tells you, she tells you the same story every night, but it's with a whole different bunch of theatrical effects, right? I mean, Arjuna doesn't always shoot his bow the exact same way every single night.
That's a really great way of putting it.
So I think that's we have to acknowledge things that we have to acknowledge that that's what has happened with our myths. And so if you look at versions of the Mahabharata, for example, what's the Japanese, what's used in the Vayamkulit, they actually give you indicators as to what the myth may have looked like before it went through a whole series of modifications. Now, we can't say for sure that that is also fact or the truth, but as a writer, it makes a huge difference to, especially when you're playing with deified characters, to have some degree of that support which says, look, I'm not the only one who thinks it might have gone down this way. There is, in fact, an age-old tradition which supports this particular way of looking at it. So that really, really comes in handy.
No, that's true. I think here we can use the history to explain the mythology or the modification in the myth. But
People think Mahabharata should be.
I've changed things quite a bit, and I've rewritten stuff and I've reimagined stuff as well. The point is, does it matter? What matters? The stories going forward matters. The reader, what they read, irrespective, there's no way we can prove what happened or didn't happen. Anywhere you go in India, there are different stories. If you go to Gujarat and you see the Ran of Kutch, they believe that Draupadi's tales created the Ran of Kutch. Anywhere, if you go somewhere else, there's a tree, they say that Arjun hung up his weapons on the tree. Draupadi had a bath in this cave. The stories around India, I've been a documentary filmmaker, I've traveled the length and breadth of the country. And everywhere I went, there's been hundreds of stories. They're all different. There is no definitive version, right? So what we are doing is trying to create a new narrative so that readers who have modern sensibilities, right? And especially for me, women, what are the stories they're taking away that make an impact on their lives? And I feel it doesn't matter.
so there's always this addition, and when we writers, when we read our scripts again, we try to make some changes. Right? Like every time we
I
read
think
it.
Vyas wasn't the only author. I think the Mahabharata and
All of us.
Ramayana have had millions of authors,
Exactly.
and we're just joining the ranks of them basically.
Absolutely, absolutely. But this deification process is there even in India. I mean, like certain cases. I mean, if I'm not wrong, it's not just the main players. Arjuna's son, right? I think it's totally about how we want to reinterpret. If you want to ground them, you can't even give them the superpowers.
So it's basically about knowing your facts and then playing around with them. So I have been told that all of you are very strong on the facts, especially the two of you. You, of course, play a lot with facts, yeah. But of course, you all have to be very
reaction.
Okay. I'd like to throw the floor open for questions now. Yes, please. Can you please pass the mic?
I have questions and then I'll probably add on to it. So, first question is, how many of you, before writing Mahabharata in your own sort of interpretation, read the Sanskrit version of it? If you know Sanskrit, that is.
Which Sanskrit version?
The one in Asiatic Library in Calcutta. It's about 7,000 years old.
No, that is answered. I think it should be the Bori. The Bori.
Oriental.
That's the critical edition of Mahabharata.
Exactly.
They have taken 60 years of their time to come to critical edition of Mahabharata, which is from 1915 to 1966 or so, or 1905 to 1966, 60 years they took to come to this critical edition. It's about 80,000 verses.
Yes.
So that at least
Even with that version, Van Newton and other scholars who spent a lifetime working on the Mahabharata had problems with it. They still believe that a lot of it there are interpolations
no problem.
which
There is
should
no
not
problem
be
with
there.
interpretations.
So,
At least you
yeah.
can see what is there in that edition, critical edition.
Yeah, and
That's
There
probably
is
That's
no
really the
one-
problem.
there is no one definitive.
Obviously, I think we
I
have
mean,
to.
I get that. And my point about asking that question is there are some words in Sanskrit which can't be translated over to English. For example, and I want to specifically talk to you about it. You mentioned about Bhishma, soul, and moksha, and all that. Now we got to understand soul goes to either hell or to heaven, and then it's over. The soul harvesting, whatever happens, but moksha, even if it goes to Swarga or Naraka, doesn't matter. The Atma still goes on its journey. It doesn't end there. And moksha is the ultimate goal. So we have to be very careful to not interpret or translate Atma as soul, because we will end up making a big mistake, because the implications of it are very different. And if we are going to be writing about it in English, we should just write it as Atma instead of writing it as soul. And that's all I would say, and I'm pretty sure most of you are much more well-read and well-written than I am. And I would let the storytellers do the job and just call out the translations that we got to be careful of.
Sorry, you have another question here?
Yes. So, for me, Ramayana and Mahabharata, the introduction of it started at the age of 6 as a dinner time tale by my grandmother. However, out of a lot of interest, I started researching about it and also trying to get more scientific evidences to those events which have taken place. Now, if we look at Mahabharata and Ramayana, there are a lot of events which have been described which can be linked to the astronomical events which really took place. So, which is why I'm slightly uncomfortable, if I may say, to use the word myth as it, rather than use the word history. Point number 2 is, last year I was listening to Dr. Shashi Tharoor speak on this subject, where he very rightly, I agree with him, he says,
the word that was put up, it was a book that was written, but lot of it's something very unique, which could be flavored with their original culture, but would essentially take on from a number of...
And I'm just thinking back about childhood books that stay true to adulthood, the memories of those books that stay true. And I think these seem to have been stayed through the times. Right? There's been Light in the Magic Faraway Tree, or it's Alice in Wonderland, and the illustrations are so few, but they were so imaginative, right? To see the clock going back, or a rabbit, cycling to stay on the same place, going back in time, it was, or Dr. Seuss, you can still recite the rhymes. So I was just wondering, in this era where, on one hand, the kids are information loaded, right? On the other hand, you want to kindle that sense of wonder, right? And imagination, and not let the innocence of childhood, and like you say, the raw questioning ever disappear, right? Do you think there are elements to writing for children today that have to be born different? Otherwise, how would a book stand out, because there's just so much being written and performed and talked about today?
Yeah, and I think in the book which I've written, that I've broken with the narrative structure that you find, which is largely text-loaded. I think kids today are, as you said, so overloaded with information that their attention span keeps moving. So you need to be precise, you need to be visual, and you need to say it in a way that it gets their language, you're speaking their language, and then they will listen. Otherwise they've moved on, because there's so much happening in all the senses. So yeah, I think I prefer less text and more of breaking up the structure, more of a mosaic, where you can take in bits from various people, they create their own pictures, their own thoughts, their own philosophies from that, rather than reading text, which I loved, but I don't see a lot of kids doing these days.
Thank you all.
Sorry, one question.
Hi.
One important element, especially when you're writing for children, is that the age, even after 1 year, their interests change drastically. whether it's 4 to 5, 5 to 6, 6 to 7, and so on and so forth. So how do you deal with that level of market, it's a wide market, you're saying, for example, the age of 4 to maybe 10 or something. How do you deal with that whole spectrum where it's really diverse? The interest level of a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old or a 7 or a 10-year-old is so different, where the mom reads to the child, or the child is an early learner and wants to read on his own. So in terms of interest, in terms of tips to kind of grab, how do you segment it, or do you do it one and hope that it works, or do you really target, saying, no, this book is going to be from this age to this age, and do you do that? What's the approach in terms of the age and interest?
When you're writing the book?
Yes.
With the approach I took, this book basically you listen first, because they have so many questions, and though the background, the subjects may be the same, it could be science, it could be fantasy, it could be kind of from each age it changes, and so it's a response to what they're asking, not so much of what you're giving them, because what they want to know is probably not what you think they want to know. So I think the basic fundamental response to that is to listen first and then listen.
What do you feel about that? Again, as you said, when we go, this is our first book, so I can't really say how it was kind of an attempt from our side in writing a book, but we did think about what age group we wanted. So we were saying somewhere from 6 to 8-year-olds. That's what we were targeting, and we are writing for them. But then when we started writing and we kind of finished it, and when we looked at it, there were a lot of text, and as you said, illustrations are very important, because for young children, they need to be able to look at it and visualize. Very young children I'm talking about, but maybe like children about 8 or 10 or 12, they probably can have more on text-heavy books, but whereas for the early years, definitely you cannot have books without pictures, because they need to be able to look at it. So illustration is a major part of that. And when we completed writing that, and when we saw that there was more text in it, and when we tried reading it to the children, we realized that it was actually okay to have a bit more text in there, because as she said, it starts off with reading. Children don't start reading on their own, they need to listen to adults reading to them. So this book can actually go beyond, lower than 6 or 5 or 6-year-olds, like even 3-year-olds can read it. They may not be able to read it, but the parents can read it and interpret it for them. They can look at the pictures, and they can come up. Parents can ask pictures, teachers can ask questions based on the pictures as well. But we did have an age range in mind when we wrote it.
Can I also add to both of you that finally what matters is the habit that you create for the child. It is not about the age. A 3-year-old sometimes is really interested in a book and has a long attention span, which is probably more than a 7-year-old, and a 7-year-old can't. So I feel role modeling it as a parent is very important, as a teacher is very important, and creating a beautiful habit that books are precious. Not that you're reading so you're doing a wonderful job, it's part and parcel of your life. It's not something extraordinary. That is what you're supposed to be doing. If that message can be given in a subtle way, I have a real example of us reading, and I think I've worked hard to actually do that for. I'm not proud about it, but I think that's our role that we have to play as well. So that's important.
Annoy you, something you find that is lacking or is irritating, and that you've tried to correct in your own book, you've tried to do differently in your book?
It's not really the books that affect me, but sometimes if people overcorrect me and try to change the way that I work, sometimes that annoys me.
I think we need to wind up the session. We have crossed the time limit. So, Zafar?
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
It's my honor, deep honor, to be able to introduce two very established works. because they are known for performance poetry, I think it's better that they take the stage over there. The first wonderful poet that we have with us is Dr. Chris Mooney Singh. He's a novelist, poet, playwright, short story writer, publisher, critic, voice actor, and musical performer. That's a lot. He has worked as a full-time literary arts facilitator and advocate in Singapore since 2003, and that's when we first met, yeah? Chris Mooney Singh's first novel, Foreign Madam and the White Yogi, was commended in the Victorian Premier's Literary Awards in 2015 in Australia. That's huge. His second novel, Ghost on a Bumboat, is a work of speculative fiction set during Hungry Ghost Month in Singapore. He has published several collections of verse, the last two being The Beer Chameleon and The Laughing Buddha Cab Company. He also co-edited the Penguin Book of Christmas Poems. Dr. Singh has written plays, scripted poetry, performances, and librettos, and seen them produced in Singapore and Australia. In addition, he has published or presented poetry and short stories and literary essays in the UK, US, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong, and India, and South Korea, and the Philippines. So we've got two very internationally published and respected writers. And finally, Dr. Chris Mooney Singh is chairman of the Rabat Research and Education Foundation in India, dedicated to the revival of lost Sikh and North Indian.
Just Chris or Mooney Singleton, no worries. I'm Australian born, as you can tell by my broad vowel accent, but by my turban you can tell that I have something to do with India, definitely. I became Sikh in 1989 by choice after a lifetime of interest in India that started originally from a suburb in Canberra, where I grew up, a multicultural suburb with no Indian families at that time. But my first Indian influence was a yellow kite that I used to fly, or different coloured tissue papered kites that I used to fly above the suburb from a local park. And I later discovered that these kites that I used to get from a Mr. Marshall, or Mr. Marsh from the back of his kind of station wagon from agricultural and shows around the state, were actually Indian patangs. And I used to fly them and then remend them. And when I went to India many years later, I said, hey, that's the kite I used to fly when I was a kid. So I felt a long thread of connection with India from an early age. But anyway, I want to read three poems. First one is a Singaporean-based poem. It's dedicated to my brother-in-law, who's a Punjabi. I married into a Punjabi family. I was a Sikh before I became part of a Sikh Punjabi culture. And he used to, after his retirement from the police force, he used to drive cabs. So this is a taxi sonnet for Harjit Singh. The driver clicks the clock inside the cab after his break at the Kopitiam, after Carlsberg, cable football, chili crab, and putting on another kilogram. An atomic clock, despite his growing flab, he knows the ways around the traffic jam and speaks Hokkien, Malay, and takes a stab at Tamil song or English epigram while taking Angmos to their Friday night pub crawl or ferrying wife and mum with groceries. Though Grab and Ubers seeing his flag fare fall, the speedometer stays steady. He sits tall, no scheming out long routes. He prays, Lord, please let me chauffeur the one who rides in all. I've caught the disease of using these devices to read poems from, as many of you young poets in Singapore are doing these days. I dream in India a lot of my poetry, I guess. I've written a lot of poems that have Indian backgrounds and landscapes. But the first poem is a dedication to Indian poets writing in English, and it's a cento. A cento is a poem where we kind of steal lines from various sources and acknowledge them and put them together in arrangement in a new poem. So it's a kind of cut and paste job, okay? So this was taken from an anthology of about 60 Indian poets writing in English, and it's called Dialogues. I put you into writing and put you into speaking. You barely hear it. Each is blind-toed taste. They're kind of like couplets, like guzzle couplets. I call out to the raven, my harem, my black rose. You believe you know me, wide-eyed English lit type. I walk past Jealousy Park with its orange seesaws. Is this how you picked up your other acolytes? I begged a promise, offered myself in heavy boots. This woman looked straight at you, her dark hair hectic. I am drenched in the intractable scent of her hair. Is it day where you are, or does the moon loiter? Yes, I heard the stories. Yes, I heard some talk. Your innocence will be punished. This is the rule. Who was it I slept with last night? I do not remember. That was your skull on the bottom shelf. So, a bit of an experimental piece just to give a sense of the flavour of poets, 14 poets writing in English today. The last poem I want to finish with is a longer poem. Everybody take a deep breath. Long poem. No, it's not that long. It's a poem, really it's two different theories that are very current in the world in linguistics and other fields. We can call it tree theory and rhizome theory, just to get the root metaphor going a little bit. Tree elders on jute string beds where children ping their marbles. You are the hotel of mendicant sons and rat and vole keyholes for cobras. The fertility tree at Holi, throwing out rainbow shadows of chalk dust. No one would disrespect the tree of conception, bobbing with plastic hope dolls, or plunder the prosperity tree adorned with ornate golden earrings. Yes, you are your own temple by the Mandir. Best of all, you are the shade tree for village schoolyards. No one in their right mind would want to be reborn as a low totem worm through causing the death of the banyan. You are the sunset prayer time tree ringing with brass god bells, young women circumambulate you, chanting Ram, Ram on fasting nights and marry you, twining red thread around your girth to change their luck when a mumbling girl has serious blots on her astrological chart. Yes, you are the festival of lights where the Rangoli colours form chalk circles on cow dung, you the root shelf for ghee lamps. Even Alexander embraced you. One vast banyan tree gave shelter to 7,000 storm-bombed Greeks along the Narmada River. Blueprint of empire, the first cosmopolis, rhizome hinterland. Without doubt, you are the nation tree. Slow epoch builder, the wish-fulfilling tree, Kalpa Vriksha taproot to the Vedas. Of all your followers, the Indian miner, that little black hooded fellow with a yellow beak has always been true and stays your best disciple. Eater of pygmy figs, he scatters your seed, kingdom after kingdom. We, the battalions of Hanuman monkeys, cling to your hairy chest, replaying epics in the subplot tangle of trunks and down-root runners, while you stay firm, echo umbrella, sheltering us from angry gods. Even as coal mines choke the lungs of jungles that you rule over, even as electric monsoons throw down their El Nino javelins, even as the ozone continues to be shredded like a flimsy blue raincoat, still you remain the solid idea of permanence, a supreme being able to spread new roots from a single trunk like a city of elephants across the acres, stretching through time and space like a webwork of milky star fields. I only have one question for you, Banyan. How much time is left to us? Thank you.
We get a nature poem and spoken word albums with his band Neon and Wonder, and has collaborated with well-known Singapore musicians such as Danny Heiko and Tim Dakota. He is the co-founder and principal photographer of Mackerel, a culture magazine. Everybody, big round of applause for Jerry.
Long bios are always so embarrassing, don't you think? Thank you, Desmond. I've decided to read a sequence of travel poems, so no slam poetry this afternoon from me, but these are all travel poems from India. I've visited India a few times and have collected quite a few observations. So I begin, going to jump straight in with one called Anjana Market, and this is from Goa. I wait for Wednesdays, the carnival of 1,000 beach stalls, strung up like uncountable lanterns on parade. Silk saris and sun-print blankets become the backdrop for coin conjurers as the mango wood drummers beat down the pelts of their prices. Two Western girls, half-moon hippies, slip shiny pieces of Goa up each arm, snakes encircling their warm skins. Close by, a thin-voiced woman trying to feed 7 bare-bottomed children sells me sandals a size too small. Sipping lassi at midday, I watch a prey of backpackers drift towards Tibetans who have spread bronze bodhisattvas on canvas. I too carry an amulet for my journey. The market kaleidoscope turns the colors in us. We are like those artisans under the palm trees who chisel elephants within elephants. Infinity from a single block of sandstone. This one is called Ribs and Bones, and it's also from Old Goa and Panjim. There is a quay just across Dinner Island where rusty ships wait for passengers to make the river crossing. Here, an older boat lies on its side, dead against the drumming motors of its brothers plying the narrow strait. When was this moment? Heaven pulling its candor from the shape of a life afloat. Ribs and bones bleach open like a Viking feast against fine-grained light. It falls the same, whether on Goa or the Ganges at Varanasi. Men and women leave everything behind in their quest to die by this holy river. They board a train for the last time, stare sightlessly against fields never to be plowed again. Huddling on the banks, they wait until death calls to throw their last rupees on a burning pile of wood. It will float them downriver on the dark waters. But the body of this ship is no cause for sorrow. It has entered into a softer haven of hulls, and the light that falls only falls in peace on those who believe in the life of a river, where you can always make a journey that has a return. So a few years later, and after another trip to India this time, I was in Rajasthan, and I stayed in a Haveli in somewhere in Jodhpur, and I met a very interesting man. I wrote a poem about him. And the poem begins with a line from a band that you might have heard of. It's called Florence and the Machine. And the line goes, just keep following the heart lines in your hand. So this is Sunil the Brahmin. He would read me the truth of words spliced by the lines of my hand, infested heartbeats of calloused stories. His own thumbs will not bend, steeled by a certain inflexibility to step from the Haveli of his fathers into this pulsing world, sheared by jagged roofs and backpackers. The walls of his blue-daubed house open and close their doors with older sight, blood etched from the lineage on his palm, a history of Brahmins as soothsayers, the holy lines in their head clear as the need for a city's arteries to flow, a sure pump of wisdom that foiled uprisings. They walked for centuries in the fault lines of kings, telling of fame and famine, although Sunil speaks to me in smaller worlds, of my own love lines split like Jodhpur's road winding from the unconquered fort, as my palm reveals its map of the maker's blade, the unfinished road pressed against my heart. Last one, and this is, well, when I heard Chris's last poem, something triggered in me, and I realized that I have a poem about banyan tree as well. And this is a very fresh poem because just about a month ago I visited Auroville in India, and at the center of the Auroville is this amazing building called the Matre Mandir, and well, next to it is a massive banyan tree. And the banyan tree is in a way, the spiritual center. It is a geographical center of Auroville, but in many ways it's a spiritual center as well. So this is a poem about the great banyan tree of Auroville. This poem's called Grounded. The great banyan tree of Auroville is a wise old man, arms and legs stretching like spokes of an umbrella up to the sky and down into soil, rooting his great spreading heart into the sandstone of this baked land. Sees this chant carried in distracted eyes, sees this urge to leave after making a picture that means nothing more than yet another tree on a clear day. Stop. Place your heart to the beating heart of this tree. Listen to its song. There are myths and legends in its voice. There are seasons and the soft hue of memory in each leaf. Nothing is sacred, yet all is holy. The way to God is not in the busy hand or the pounding mind. The way to God is to rest in His spirit under a banyan tree. Here is creation in all its shades, from life to death, beginning to end, and love just means love here. So do we give it freely or hold back? Do we make it known or keep silence? Or do we take after the banyan tree and allow ourselves to spread our roots to freely tell better stories? Or will we only grow for ourselves higher and higher until one day we touch the sky and find that we have not gone deep enough to reach so high, and the slightest storm sends us crashing with no one around to watch us fall?
Thank you so much for the travel poems and the other banyan tree poems. Thank you so much, beautiful poems, Mark. All right, so I'm of India, or what it means to share an Indian identity. And the next question was, are there certain things, certain trends and developments you'd like to see emerging in poetry that talks about India? Both of you have written poems, have read beautiful poems about India. What do you feel about the scene? You know, is there something you'd like to see happening in the poetry that speaks of India?
I think that what I want to speak on this point is that a lot of Indian culture as well as literature has been inspired great writers and thinkers from the West for many years, and poets too, particularly modernism, Yeats and Eliot, and we take the Asian theme, Ezra Pound, who kind of invented free verse by looking at the haiku and Chinese lyrics. And that has not been fully acknowledged in a way. It's been reinterpreted, rebranded as a Western theme. However, it is deeply Asian, deeply Indian. And I want to see more Indian writing, more Indian writers acknowledged, you know, globally. There are people like in fiction, like Salman Rushdie, the whole wave of fiction writers. Poets, I suppose Vikram Seth might be a very prominent person, but he's also better known as a fiction writer. So I think that these, you know, India is such an ancient culture, a rich culture, that it has fed, that the world has fed upon, it keeps feeding upon, and being nurtured by its ancient traditions. So I feel the importance of India in my own personal life, and I would like to see it celebrated more widely in the world, not taken and then rebranded by you know, kind of literary movements of the West, in that kind of acquiring way.
So the mediums of access perhaps are not really present. Our local bookstores don't really, you know, stock these writers. So perhaps we need to have more conversations with the right people, I mean, Kitab has done a lot already, but I think there are so many writers out there whose voice needs to be heard, and because these stories are worth telling.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, it's as much about market forces as it is about the aesthetics, right? Yeah, I went up to Goa as well, and I met Ranjit Hosgood and Arundhati Subramaniam and Herman Vidvati, who are wonderful Indian poets. The market in India alone is huge. It's not like Singapore, you've got 5.5 million people in India. Poetry actually sells, which was lovely to hear about, and they're such wonderful poets. But anyway, let's just keep going. What are the difficulties and complexities of writing about race, especially in Singapore? Can you all deal with that thorny issue? Race and identity in poetry.
Well, in the first place, nobody really knows where I come from. So people, constantly ask me if I'm Singaporean when I'm in Singapore, and I really want to ask them back. I said, yes, well, yeah, I was from Ang Mo Kio, and how about you, And then they get offended. No, I just wanna think, because I think you look from UK or you're from America. In terms of identity, because I write in a variety of genres, so when I do things like performance poetry, there is a very grounded persona, which could sometimes be in a confessional mode, so I'm talking about my life, but also might just be a persona I invent or create. And then that's, I guess, one way to foreground issues of identity, although I use humor to make it, to take it lighthearted. So for example, I have a poem about learning how to swim and doing life saving and not being very good at swimming because I have childbearing hips. So I kind of like swim like this. So that's not the best thing, but self-deprecatory humor is a great way to connect with an audience, right? So in that way, I kind of negotiate my identity. It's not that I pick and choose what I want. After all, I'm born in Singapore, so I regard myself as a Singaporean. I've grown up with actually very little Indian influence. It's a very westernized kind of upbringing. Also because my faith is Christian, so there is a lot of dislocation, I would say, from these roots that I have. I have roots from China and roots from India as well. So that's just talk to me later if you want.
Yeah, border crossings, right? I wish we had time for that France anecdote, but we'll go to Chris. Chris just told me just now that he sees himself as reverse diasporic, which is interesting. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, actually, that's not my tag originally. Someone writing about my work, a Sri Lankan scholar, actually reading my work, thought that I actually was like an NRI, maybe brought up or born in Australia from Indian parents, remembering going back to my roots in Punjab, thinking that I was actually Indian in my genes, my DNA. But no, I adopted this way, and I adopted it because of a long search and a deep need to find and to define myself in a place like Australia where it's like bland suburbia. 90% of Australia is suburbia, and it is dull for many people. It was for me at least. And my kite that I was flying above the suburb in those days was my way out, was my way of imagination to go elsewhere, to find something deeper than just this veneer of smear of Western culture that has been planted down in the southern continent. I felt that, hey, I don't come from those places. I actually am closer to Asia. I've flown over Asia to go to England and so on. But it's actually Asia where I'm closest to. That's why when I wrote my first novel, I consciously started with the story during a performance of the Mahabharata of Peter Brook's version of that at the Adelaide Festival many years ago, to extend the idea that the Mahabharata as a travelling text like the Odyssey and the Iliad in the Western tradition, this text has travelled all through this archipelago region, and now in my little work was quite big actually, but my attempt is to bring that also to Australia, to say, hey, we are part of this region, not just economically, but also culturally. There's riches here
this is a place we should think more of and gain more depth from, put our roots down more consciously and not be newer, neo-imperialistic sort of backward thinking white Australians, quite frankly, because a lot of Australians still have that unfortunate thing in their makeup. I'm not one of them. I'm one of the ones that wants to be on this side of the southern hemisphere.
Yes, you've got to be post-colonial.
So the thing is, with so many voices that have been born today and so much reading around, do you think, I believe you put some of your poetry to song, do you think that's a way of getting it out to the audience? Because songs and the melodies tend to stay.
I don't often sing. There's elements that are sung but spoken as well with music backing. I mean, I don't, actually this is probably a flaw on my end, but I don't actually think about like distributing it to a wide audience, getting heard or touring and stuff like that. I just think that perhaps this is a way to express myself, and I try to find that avenue of expression. So yeah, not quite what you're saying.
I think we who have kind of been involved with sort of starting spoken word activities, poetry slam in Singapore, we do feel the obligation to connect with audiences, not just other writers or poets, to be real with new people and to try to evangelize poetry amongst ordinary people so they get to enjoy the beauty of the language. And it can be done in a sung form, it can be recited with vigor. I think the main thing is that we just keep trying to do our small bits, and there is a sizable increase of activity emerging of spoken and written traditions in Singapore today, and I think that that's a kind of a healthy thing.
Okay, maybe we have time for just one more question. Oh, yes. Hello.
You both have very clearly, I see the two of you as very ASEAN. So, would you both say, or all three of you, if you see poetry as basically very borderless and that it transcends, or very borderless, like without borders of nationality, religion, and do you see it transcend all barriers into a more humane arena?
Well, poetry is still rooted in language, so I think it is bordered, because language is bordered. It is not some kind of elemental cry that cuts across any kind of, although the sentiment of poetry is probably an elemental cry. So in that sense, yes, it is borderless. But I think as long as it's bordered by language, you do have limitations, and even in translation is at most an approximation.
We could do like, 16 hours of this, but anyway.
Just last point, I agree with Mark on that one, and but poetry has something that other forms don't have. It has brevity and directness. It can appeal. It breaks that fourth wall of theatre, and it connects audiences emotionally through language, whether it's in English or whether it's in Hindi or whatever. We obviously still have to work within the language groups, but still poetry has that ability, I think, to touch and join hearts to hearts and minds to minds, and that's the power of poetry.
On that wonderful note, the power of poetry, could we have a big round of applause for Chris Munee and Mark Mallon, our wonderful poets. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you.
Rani, Taxis Away is set in Kuala Lumpur. It is Mrs. S.V. Strong Views Kandia. And by query, Mrs. Kandia, I stammer, are you here alone? No, Chandran is here with me. Chandran? Who's he? My taxi driver. Mrs. Kandia gives him such a glare that he looks down. Remember the Malay proverb, paga makan padi? This paga fence is trying to eat the rice paddy it should be protecting. You innocent little girl, come, I will rescue you from this cunning kidnapper and take you home safely before anything terrible happens to you. My throat feels tight, but I can't dash out at an elder. No, Mrs. Kandeya, listen. If a young girl like you makes one mistake, she will have to pay for it for the rest of her life. I can help you choose the kueh. Since when did taxi drivers specialize in choosing cakes? No, Mrs. Kandeya, I chose the kueh on my own. It's at home that I don't get to choose anything. My younger brother chooses everything. Mrs. Kandeya raises her notorious eyebrows. Does your mother know about this? No, I wanted to surprise her with some kueh. Mrs. Kandeya wags her forefinger at me. Rani, I'm going to tell your mother about this. No, Mrs. Kandeya, I'm the one who asked him to bring me here. People are staring at me. I'm going to your house now, Rani. You better come along with me. Her voice brooks no argument, almost casting a spell. She says that if I don't get into her car, she'll report Chandran. I climb quietly to the back seat of her car. I turn to see Chandran stumbling into his taxi, people pointing at him. Kadavale! Mrs. Kandeya may broadcast it to our whole community and it may reach my school. Mrs. Kandeya stops his car at our front gate. Mr. Kandeya stops his car at our front gate. Mrs. Kandeya gets out and he drives off to park the car. He looks relieved not to be involved in his wife's melodrama. Mrs. Chineya, you won't believe what I saw at the kueh stall. Mrs. Kandeya calls out to my mother. What happened? Amma looks first at Mrs. Kandeya, then at me. Back again at Mrs. Kandeya, kicking her slippers off. Mrs. Kandeya sinks into one of our government-issued rattan armchairs in our lounge. I saw your Rani with a strange man in Kampam Baru. Is this true, Rani? Amma glares at me. Amma, I just asked Chandran to take me to buy some kueh for the family. I'm not sure about this Chandran fella. Mrs. Kandeya tells Amma, I just saved your daughter's honor from that man taking her to out-of-the-way places. No, Mrs. Kandeya, I know you have a keen sense of rumor, but it's true. Chandran is the taxi driver we arranged to take her to school and back. In public buses, our young man will be up to monkey tricks. Monkey tricks, donkey tricks. What do you think your crocodile Chandran is up to? Has he been charming you too with his kueh tricks and treats? I'm going to call our RT, Road Transport Telenor, to cancel this kueh during crocodile's taxi license. Then as the French Queen, Marionette Anthony, said, let him eat kueh. You won't be feeding him his daily bread. That's what our convent nuns taught us. I don't know any French queens, Mrs. Kandeya, but Chandran was well recommended to us. Which fool recommended him to you? Your doctor, Muthuraja. Mrs. Kandeya's face turns pale as she leaves briskly. My next story, Victoria in a Kimono, is set between British and Japanese Malaya. It received favorable reviews from the Hindu and Statesman in India, and it was the editor's choice for Ireland's Fish International Story Prize. It was republished in the Malign and the Hibiscus contemporary short stories from Singapore and Malaysia by Penguin India. The tiger of the Victoria Institution, Ramanan, the former English master, was so busy slapping Muhammad Ali in the school hall, he did not realize that Queen Victoria's portrait had tilted to the right on its, had tilted to the left on its own. Rightward, it might have been a good omen. But was this 13 years, sir? 13 years of what? 13 years of wasted life, sir. The tiger was satisfied. The nickname Bill Sykes died as promptly as the dog did, never to be heard again. Ramanan felt that Queen Victoria would have contemplated with pride her tiger's victory, if somewhat askew. Ramanan was with his colleagues in the staff room. This rain, he began during a particularly heavy downpour, reminds me of the telegram my father sent to his district officer. Rain so heavy, stop. Whole district flooded, stop. Bridge absconded. Full stop. Dr. Lewis replied, quiet, quiet, turning a third quiet into a cough before remarking that he had rugby results to go and check. But that, continued Ramanan, was less astounding than when requesting compassionate leave. Wife died, stop. Request emergency leave to go to the crematorium to fire her. Full stop. That itself was nothing compared to his reply to the expatriate officer in the treasury, who questioned my father's request for boots for his staff as part of the malaria eradication program. Does your department propose to stamp out malaria literally with all those boots? But was he a match for my father's quick reply? Needed for the eradication of sarcastic treasury officials. They should be stamped out literally. Ramanan was walking home when a military truck loaded with coconuts stopped at the crossroad. Soldiers hammered wooden poles into each corner of the road. Ramanan froze when the stench hit him. Then he saw flies swarming around the poles. They were decapitated heads speared onto each pole, and he recognized the few of the faces. This question. Now it was I, not you or we. It was him against me. You know our custom. Which one? I folded my arms. You know, the one where the husband marries the childless wife's single sister. Oh, that one. I was deliberately casual. I thought the wife had to die first before the husband remarried. Not necessarily, he continued with gritted teeth. If she has not been productive for many years, that's some kind of death. It's your duty to bear children. So you're planning to proceed as if I'm presumed dead? I asked. Sarcasm gave me some consolence. I rarely overrule the public service department on service matters. But this time, I have to make an exception. I cannot allow one of my officers to be humiliated in front of his own community. Kasian! I empathize with you. After all, accommodating all communities, including minorities, is another unique Malaysian feature, like our rojak.